Hi everyone, this is Taryn with Wonderfully Made Handcrafting, and today I am starting working through the Walk This Way kit from By the Well for God. Now, how I usually go through By the Well for God's devotionals is I actually read the whole devotional at first, and I kind of star the ones that I want to definitely journal. So I have a lot of ones starred this month. I was very impacted by this devotional, and so I'm starting off with day 4's journaling. Now I do jump back and forth, so you might see me go from day 12 to day 3 and back. It's just what's speaking to me that day. And so we're starting off with day 4, which is talking about the midwives in Exodus and how they were fearful of God in a good way, and they didn't kill the male Hebrew babies like Pharaoh wanted them to. So I've taken that Kingdom Quintessence stamp and I stamped that on the back side of a spiritual prescription card because it was practically the same size. And then I fed that through my typewriter, and I decided I would choose one of the midwives. And so I chose Shiphrah. I think that's how you say it. And I wrote down that her name means beautiful. And then under stories and events, I said a midwife who feared God. And I just talked about all her little attributes in that little card. And here I am taking a piece of paper, I think it's a Maggie Holmes piece of paper that I have of little old portraits. And I found this one of, I'm assuming a mom really, holding a baby, but I decided that would be the perfect little passport picture for this midwife. Now, Judy wrote our devotional this month, and she quotes Elizabeth George, and she says, "The one who fears the Lord dreads God's displeasure, desires his favor, reveres his holiness, submits to his will, is grateful for his benefits, sincerely worships him, and conscientiously obeys his commandments." And we see these midwives in Exodus 1 who fear the Lord so much and have all those attributes that Elizabeth George explains, that they go up against the king or the Pharaoh and decide not to kill the male Hebrew babies. And we read in Exodus 1:15, it starts, "Then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, when you serve as midwife to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him, but if it is a daughter, she shall live." But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this and let the male children live?" The midwives said to Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them." So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. So as you can see here, I'm using that framed and Grace background stamp that came out this month, and I'm stamping it in some vintage photo archival ink. And it is a great stamp because it matches up with itself, but it also doesn't necessarily need to if you're using it just as a background. I know that most of my background is going to be covered up, so I'm not too concerned about matching those frames perfectly. And here I am. I'm going to grab my new stamp set, Steadfast Growth, which is the new florals, and I'm going to stamp that on a vellum piece of paper. Now this I'm going to add to my cluster with my little passport. It'll add something a little more feminine to this page because I really want to bring in that this is talking about the midwife. And so I like having that extra texture and that floral bunch there. I'm going to rip the edges of this vellum because I don't want it to look perfect. Sometimes when you cut vellum, it's good if you cut it in straight lines, but not necessarily when you just have a rolling kind of cut. And so I like the torn edge look better with vellum for certain things like this. Now I also want to make a note, when I stamp on vellum, it is a little slick, so I choose to use StazOn ink. I also think you can use archival ink, but StazOn is my go-to for those slippery surfaces. Now a lot of this video is going to be me fidgeting with how I want my cluster. As you can see, every time I'm getting frustrated with how my cluster is coming out, I go back to work on my background. So pretty soon here, I'm gonna switch over, yep, there it is, to go work on something else. And here I grabbed Tim Holtz's new frames. These are like a metallic metal almost, they look like. And the fun thing about it is that they are chipboard, so you can peel back the layers. So I know this Bible can't take a lot of chunk because it's just an interleaved Bible and not a spiral bound. So I make sure to peel back a ton of those layers, but it still has that frame look. Now, as I'm trying to figure out this cluster, I'm also thinking of the background because I want something more mixed media look. So I decide to grab my new stencil from Tim Holtz. I picked this up from By the Well for God when I ordered my kit. This is just like a numbers and alphabet stencil. And I take my embossing ink and I'm just going to smush it through the numbers. It's probably not the best way to do this, but hey, it worked. And so I grabbed this new embossing glaze I have. They had the new 3-packs at Hobby Lobby from Tim Holtz. And so this is in the color Speckled Egg. Now what's great about these is that they are see-through, and so they will take on whatever colors behind it as well. So even though Speckled Egg is like a blue color, when I heat it over the vintage photo and frayed burlap that I have on the background, it actually ends up making a sage color. So it matches perfectly with the other cluster ephemera that I have. These embossing glazes you don't want to overheat, so I make sure to heat up my heat tool first, and then I'm just going to put it on the numbers, and as soon as I see it change, I try to move on to the next area. I really enjoy working with embossing powders, and so I think these new glazes to me are going to be really fun to work with because you can create so many different color combinations with the embossing glaze as well as the dye that you have behind it or whatever color you have behind it. So many different options. So these are definitely worth an investment, I think. Now here I am grabbing those clusters again. I keep on trying to decide if I want to add something else, but it looks a little bit too busy. So I think that I'm just going to leave it how it is with those 5 pieces. But I'm still not happy with it, so I'm going back to my background. So this is the new stencil from By the Well for God, and I'm just using the stone part of it, not the sandals, and putting texture paste through it. Now what's awesome about texture paste when you use it over some distress oxide is that since it's wet, it's going to eventually take on the color that's behind it. So as you see at the end of this video, the texture paste has fully taken over and taken on that frayed burlap and vintage photo color. And so it ends up just being a texture itself and not necessarily just a stark white against the background. I've also decided to add this Dina Wakley gloss spray and the color sand to the background just to add a different kind of element and feel. And now I am deciding definitely on this cluster. I decided to add this floral vellum piece to my Fear God card by using my tiny attacher staples, because that way I don't have to use any glue and you won't see any glue kind of smushing out behind the vellum. This little Kingdom Quintessence card is adding to the Fear God card as well with some glue. And then I will add this frame. Now I cut the frame because I want to be able to use the extra piece that would have been hidden behind all the cards in a different Bible journaling entry. So here is the cluster. I try to make the cluster off the page as much as possible because then I can actually see where I want to place it all. After that is placed, I'm going to add a little bit of ribbon to this page and fold down a corner and put a paper clip on the passport, and that will be it. I hope you've enjoyed this page. Please like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. You can go ahead and follow me over on Instagram at Wonderfully Made Handcrafting. That's where I do most of my posts and little tips and tricks. And I hope to see you next time. Bye guys.